Hello, my name is Science Spirit, and today I'm looking at a creationist website called Truth in Science. Now, the first thing to notice that this, for me at least, is a problematic title for a website. The reason will become clear if it isn't to you already. There's no absolute truth in science. Science strives toward a good model of reality, but it can't claim to reflect reality or explain it just yet. In fact, scientists, like everybody else, must accept some premises which we can't prove are true. Reality exists. Observations reflect said reality. Our brains give us access to a sufficiently good enough way of thinking about reality to draw conclusions with some degree of certainty. And you might want to formulate some other ones, but this is just off the top of my head. In discussing this website, I will mainly go by what they claim about themselves. So I'm clicking on this about Truth in Science. So this is where Truth in Science detail what they're all about, and I follow up some of these points with other parts of their website. The board of directors and members of the Council of Reference are all Christians with traditional biblical beliefs. This is an interesting use of the word traditional. I don't think that over time Christians necessarily believed the same things about the Bible, such as who wrote it and when and why, and of course whether it is literally true. People have used the Bible for quite a long time as their holy book. By traditional, it is important to note that they mean literal rather than traditional. Also, Christians are not the only people to have at least some parts of the Bible, namely the Old Testament, in their purview. The Jewish faith and Islam are also based on parts of the Old Testament, parts of the Bible. This, but I'm reading into this a little bit, sets them up for the no true Scotsman fallacy, or in this case the no true Christian fallacy, but we will see. Truth in Science is an organization that focuses purely on science and lets the scientific evidence speak for itself. Okay, letting evidence speak for itself isn't a thing. Evidence always has to be interpreted, be it biblical or scientific. What they mean here is what most people mean. The audience is expected to make the correct inferences themselves, and by correct I mean that you are guided to one particular interpretation of the evidence. The problem with that is that it means that A, they're not going to say anything that you could then show is false, and given that a core principle of science is making falsifiable claims, this might be problematic here. But also B, why would you imply certain things, but then not explicitly state them? Newton didn't invent gravity, it was already there. But he did invent the thinking around gravity, though not alone. He postulated hypotheses and made predictions, and saw whether those predictions held true. Some of his predictions proved problematic for believers in God who didn't think that the orbits of the planets could be anything other than perfectly round. Because why would God allow this? Eventually, though, it was simply inescapable that planets describe elliptical orbits. In fact, it was their deviations, specifically those of Neptune and Uranus, caused by the interactions between planets, which, for example, led to the discovery of Pluto. The other claim I'm going to immediately dispute here is that they focus purely on science. I've not come across any of their scientific research, a theme which I will explore later. Nor do they focus on the science without first putting on their Bible goggles. So let's move on to the next claim about who they are and what they do and how they are doing it. We accept the Royal Society motto, nullius in verba, take the word of no one, and follow where the evidence leads. Okay, it's a motto, but it doesn't mean that you are cynical to the point of disbelief. What it stands for is, show me the data, let me judge for myself, and then I will repeat your experiment and see whether I can get the same result. It is a basis for discussion, but it doesn't mean that you don't believe somebody when they claim something based on evidence. You suspend judgment. You also question authority, and by that I mean two things. A, you don't believe it simply because somebody has said or written something. And B, authority means that somebody who is regarded as an expert received a certain bonus in terms of their expertise, but all of what they're saying is up for investigation. Sometimes scientists fall short of these requirements and simply claim that what they are thinking is true absolutely. And sometimes scientists say something regrettable to other non-scientists or experts, which sounds like they are certain, but was just an unfortunate sentence uttered in desperation. For example, if somebody says that they are certain that climate change is caused by human beings. Now, to be clear, there's a vanishingly small chance that it isn't, and that something will crop up which will convince us otherwise. However, few areas of science have received so much corroboration from areas of science all over the place that we can be reasonably certain. Scientists do not deal in absolute truth. This isn't a no true Scotsman fallacy if you accept the motto of the Royal Society for one. And now to the juicy bits. We highlight the scientific evidence which is contrary to the neo-Darwinian paradigm and expose the ideological bias which hides or ignores such evidence. So this is interesting. When I first came across their website a long time ago, the only issue they raised about apparent inaccuracies in school books was evolution. They say they are all about science, but their main interest is, of course, evolution. More recently, they've added cosmology to it, and they pretty much reduced that to the Big Bang, which is a misnomer. In fact, it was termed by astronomer Fred Hoyle during a broadcast in 1949, and science has added a few more things to the theory of late. Anyway, they accuse unspecified people in the scientific community of hiding or ignoring evidence which goes against the neo-Darwinian paradigm, whatever that is. A couple of things. Darwinism is what they want to call evolution. They often conflate social Darwinism with evolution and then claim that evolution is wrong. This is a straw man fallacy. They say there is ideological bias. But what ideology? Evolution is not an ideology, which is why they like to call it Darwinism, of course. Gravity is also not an ideology, nor is the concept of energy or the periodic table or other helpful scientific models. Scientific theories advance knowledge by making predictions which can then be tested. So truth and science are already failing hard by accusing scientists of an ideological bias if they hold with the neo-Darwinian paradigm, which I'm going to interpret as evolution. But you know, they have constructed their straw man, and now they are adding guilt by association to scientific crimes. We believe genuine education in schools and colleges will alert students to all the available evidence and ideas, so that they in turn can interpret the evidence for themselves and draw rational conclusions. So the first inference I'm making is that they don't believe that what is happening now in schools is genuine education, and that schools, because of their unholy focus, are biased towards evolution and keep relevant information away from students. Now, I was a teacher in a secondary school, among other things, and I haven't come across a Key Stage 3 science book. This is science for the under 15s, that hasn't mentioned creationism, along with natural religions and their creation myths and other failed theories, such as Lamarckian evolution, which, you will notice, also has evolution after it. They also assume that students have no access to other sources of information and are indoctrinated into Darwinian-style evolution. One of the problems I faced as a science teacher is to get students thinking in a precise way, and to not mismatch concepts with inappropriate words. Anyone who has taught the difference between mass and weight and gravity probably shares my pain. Anyhow, the accusation is that secular schools indoctrinate and that students need to be liberated from dogma by religious instruction. That's not my experience, but whatever. Also, let's see your evidence. I would love to see what a creationist scientific article looks like. Finally, they imply that scientists draw irrational conclusions, and sometimes that is of course correct. But it also doesn't necessarily mean that the conclusion of a rational argument is sound. So an argument can be rational, but if it is based on false premises, then it isn't necessarily sound. For example, all birds lay eggs and can fly in the air. Penguins can't fly. Although they do lay eggs, therefore penguins aren't birds. Valid? Sure. Sound? No. Similarly, if I accept that the Bible is A, literally true, and B, the Word of God, and C, God exists, only then can I use the Bible as a premise for valid conclusions based on its content. But even then, the soundness of such arguments isn't guaranteed. Evolution is wrong because the Bible says that all things drowned in a flood merely a few thousand years ago and evolution requires millions of years. Valid? Sure, if you accept the premises. Sound? Well, only if you're willing to reject evidence from all over the scientific community. But who is keeping students away from a plethora of evidence now? We aim to promote and stimulate open discussion and allow people to come to informed conclusions. Whereas science is of course dogmatic and closed-minded as opposed to religious leaders and followers. Again, not my experience. What is a scientist's position when you talk to them about something where you don't agree? And I am assuming here that it is science you are talking about, not something the scientist doesn't know anything about. Well, the answer should be, show me your evidence. And by evidence, I don't mean evidence from the misinterpretation of scientific data. What I mean is directly relevant data which shows that your conclusion is absolutely possible. So if I'm asked to give reasons why I think evolution is true, I wouldn't go to Darwin. The discovery of DNA has since made zoological observations a bit passé. If somebody asks me about carbon-14 dating, I actually know a fair bit, and I know what a dynamic equilibrium is, what role the sun plays in replenishing carbon-14 in the atmosphere, and what the half-life and abundance of carbon-14 is, and how it can be measured. When I've discussed carbon-14 dating with creationists and young earthers, they inevitably cite some unknown case where somebody got some carbon-14 dating wrong. The fact that it is well understood science is neither here nor there for them. So, moving on. I'm now moving on to what they say are their 5 points. Not sure that you need 5 points if you are an organization, but they state this with such confidence that I'm just taking it on face value that you should have 5 points. In other words, this is their raison d'être. On point 1, we examine scientific evidence carefully and present it with honesty and integrity, especially to school and college students, both on our websites and through professionally produced media and resources. Care, honesty, and integrity are all admirable qualities, but they have nothing whatever to do with science. Let me rephrase that. Unless you carelessly collect the evidence, are dishonest about it, and aim to deceive with it. Which is, of course, what they imply about scientists. Talk about prejudice. But then again, they also rely solely on what is published. I also like the way that they are proud of their production values, which again have nothing to do with content. I will take a little detour now to such an open discussion. Now, I mentioned that I know carbon-14 dating somewhat well, and I've taught this to A-level students and undergrads. What Professor Taylor claims here is that there are anomalous results with carbon-14 dating. Coal and diamond have found to contain carbon-14, and they shouldn't, as they are millions of years old, and the half-life of carbon-14 is about 5,730 years or so. So given 8 half-lives, you can only date things back 8 times 5,730 years or so with any accuracy, so about 40 to 50,000 years. However, by then your margin of error is incredibly high. Really, you can rely on carbon-14 dating up to about 20,000 years. After that, carbon-14 decays become swamped by other decays. Does Stephen Taylor mention this? What do you think? Okay, since I don't play the same game as these guys here, the answer is no. No, he doesn't tell you. So much for frank and open, careful, honest, and with integrity. Why did they not ask somebody who is a specialist? Well, because they would say that a carbon-14 dating specialist is invested in the method working and therefore can't be trusted to be honest, because of their bias. Much in the way that GP can't be trusted because it is their work to see you coming back, right? Or a car mechanic, or any other expert. So much better to ask somebody who sort of half knows what they're talking about, clearly. Back to the points. Point 2. We expose the assumptions and methodological errors in some of today's widely accepted scientific models and point out what is conjecture and based on a materialistic worldview. This made me chuckle, to be honest. So what they are saying is that they are better placed to expose, to whom exactly, the assumptions and methodological errors in some of today's scientific models. If they are correct, then there can't be any disagreement in scientific debate about evolution, the Big Bang, genetics, human evolution, climate change, and so forth. Just have a look for yourself. There is massive debate in all of those fields, and that is what drives science forward. And let's have a quick look at what they have to say about methodological mistakes in science. Where did the first life form come from? Okay, never mind. The arguments are going to be based on a strawman version of evolution. Evolution does not address, as a theory, the origin of life. Is evolution a fact or just a theory? Oh dear. Theory is one of the highest value judgments you can make about a set of observations leading to a specific underlying set of reasons why things are the way they appear to be. Try these: theory of gravity, germ theory, Big Bang theory, collision theory, molecular orbital theory, and many more. Theory is not in science as it is in conspiracy theory or I have a theory. What is the difference between micro and macroevolution? Short answer, none. Longer answer, microevolution does not exist as a science thing. Next. Could life have begun by random chance, or must there have been a designer/creator? Again, not a question evolution can answer. Either they don't know this, or more likely they know and are just a bit, dishonest. And by the way, this is a false dichotomy. Are there other choices other than random chance or God? Because let's be clear, that's what they mean. Essentially, they are trying to guide you towards the prime mover argument. A similar false dichotomy can be seen over here. The eye, good or bad design? The eye, good or bad design too? Good or bad or no design? Why does it have to be designed? Oh, right, because you're open and frank and let science lead you until your dogma hits scientific evidence. Then it becomes an argument from personal incredulity. I can't imagine that this is correct, therefore it can't be. Great. Well done, guys. Point 3. In particular, we seek to clarify the meaning of the term evolution, so as to avoid careless acceptance of all its claims and supposed implications. So again, this is about truth in science. Evolution isn't all of science, you dingbats. Even if evolution were shown to be wrong, and good luck with that, chemistry, physics, geology, and so on still disagree with you about the age of the Earth, which you presumably put at 6,000 years despite the Bible not actually saying this. Careless acceptance is not a scientific problem. All versions of all theories of science are under investigation constantly, and while most have to be refined, some are completely discarded. Name me somebody who carelessly accepts evolution and then show me how. You may accept a theory based on wrong understanding or little evidence, but what is a sufficient level of evidence you would accept for somebody else? What was sufficient for you to accept that the Bible is true and that God exists? If you used your standard of sufficient evidence, evolution in modern science seems extremely careful and beats your featherweight standard handsomely. We advocate models based on rigorous, observable scientific evidence in contrast to unproven hypotheses lacking in experimental support. And we are back to implying which science doesn't. Funny, I couldn't find a rigorous model of your own anywhere, Truth in Science. Also, just as a side note, science is all about falsifying claims, not proving them, because you can't. Ever. Full stop. However, some theories are shown to be correct time and time again, and eventually most scientists take them as read, something which you do with one source. Can I falsify God did it? No. Why not? Because it's true? No, because there's no test for it. There are no predictions to be made. Truth in Science, as its name indicates, does not understand science, despite claiming they A. understand it better than scientists who are all biased, and B. do it better, despite not doing any experiments or making any falsifiable claims or submitting their own primary data for peer review, unless it's other creationists. And here we come to the truth in science. We seek to lobby the Department for Education to permit rather than censor the attitude of healthy criticism integral to the scientific method in school and college classrooms and laboratories. I taught creationism in schools. Didn't take me long, of course, since after God did it, there isn't much more to say. I explained why people believe that a God did it, and not just in Christianity. And I myself am not biased against religion, but against religious hypocrisy. And the hypocrisy of Truth in Science lies here. Has the state censored creationism, or is there simply a lack of evidence for God did it beyond the Bible? Does creationism throw up falsifiable hypotheses? Are creationists going to insist on ignoring evidence which doesn't fit the Bible? Is the Bible itself scientific evidence? Do Truth in Science want teaching of all alternative theories of their time, Or are they concerned with creationism only? I will let you chew on that. No, of course I won't. I said that before. I'm not leaving you alone to guess the answers to the questions. They are, by the way, no, yes, no, no, yes, and of course not creationism only. So my verdict, truth in science, is go back to the drawing board. Learn what science is really about, keep an open mind, present some science of your own, leave the scientists to do their job, and don't try and distort existing science. Thank you. See you later.